Welcome to the second day of Design for Drupal. And this session is Drupal Design SOS. You know what SOS stands for?
Save our ship.
Yeah, normally save our ship, but in this case, save our software. A little bit about me. I've been a Drupal developer since 2012. I started dabbling in it as a hobby a couple of years before that. I'm currently a senior developer at Usability, have been almost 2 years, and that opportunity first came up at this conference 2 years ago. A couple of my colleagues have come here to support me. The hat I'm wearing is supposed to suggest the avatar I use on Drupal.org and GitHub, and as of last night, also on Twitter. Since I'm not a marketing genius, I'm just darn lucky. If you have a page showing a bunch of GitHub avatars of people who have commented on or contributed to an issue, mine jumps out. And if I'm in a group photo at DrupalCon, you can find me. Yeah. But that's just sort of dumb luck. A bit about Usability. We do design, we develop, we almost exclusively work in Drupal, can do a little bit of other things if needed. We're a small company in Waltham, Massachusetts, just about 5 miles from here. It's just inside Route 128. We're currently looking for a front-end developer. I think we had one candidate interviewed earlier this week. And we're always looking for contractors, so if you want some additional work on an occasional basis, talk to us. A little bit more about me. I care about reliability and maintainability of websites. I hate duplicated effort. And I don't just mean that I intellectually think it's a bad idea, which I think everyone agrees to. I mean, I sort of feel it emotionally that duplicated effort is a bad thing, and that's one of the reasons that I'm involved with open source software. I sort of feel that if I spend a lot of time figuring out how to solve some problem, I would like to save other people the trouble of solving the same problem over again. And those two items basically say, hi guys, I'm a developer. And the rest of the things here say, I'm not a designer. Like, I wear the dad jeans. You should not ask me to choose the color scheme for your website. Ask someone else. I do have some interest in user experience broadly, but not so much in visual design. So I want things to work well, but I let other people worry about making them look nice. But I really believe in strength and diversity. You know, you need people like me who care about making sure the site doesn't go down in flames, and then you need other people who make it look appealing so that people actually want to use it. So I work with designers. And sort of the point of this session is that Drupal has lots of people like me. Drupal is built by and for developers. And I'm hoping in this session to attract some attention from developers. How many people in the audience consider themselves developers? Well, that's most of the audience. Any designers? 1, 2, okay, 3, okay, good. 3 is enough if I can convince you that we need your help and that there are ways you can help, and it will be rewarding if you help. A few points about Drupal. A content management system is hard in terms of security and flexibility. In terms of security, it's one of the stupidest ideas to have come along in the last 20 years. We're going to put up forms on a web page that anyone on the World Wide Web can access. Maybe they need to get past some password or something. But then we're going to have these forms, and they type stuff into the forms, and we save that to our database. What? And it's hard to do that in a secure way, and it's sort of amazing that there are Drupal sites that haven't been hacked. Another hard thing about a CMS is the flexibility. You don't know how long the text is going to be, how big the photos are going to be. It's really hard to predict what the layout is going to look like, or how people are going to use it, what they're going to integrate with it, what combination of modules are going to add. So it's a hard problem. And Drupal does some things really well. It does security well. And security, of course, is not a thing you get done. It's a process, and Drupal continues the process and does a good job of it. It has a really good system for managing forms. It has a system for managing users, which has gone through, each of these has gone through several generations of improvement. So if you're one of those people who says, oh, I'll just hack together a content management system over the weekend, you have to be aware of how much thought and effort has gone into these subsystems. Drupal is really good at structured and related content, and as of Drupal 8, it's really smart about caching, which is traditionally one of the 2 or 3 hardest things in computer science. But this talk isn't about the strengths of Drupal. This talk is about the weaknesses of Drupal. And mostly what I'm going to talk about is the user experience and the visual design that the people managing the website have to deal with. And those are 2 places where Drupal is weak, and everyone admits it, everyone knows it. And also, one of the things that makes it hard to work with Drupal is, you have some great idea, you make some changes to Drupal core, and you submit a patch, and you'd like to contribute it to the community. Like I said, open source software, that's the way it works. You solve a problem, no one else should have to solve the same problem. But before a new feature can get added to Drupal, it has all these requirements that it has to satisfy. And this is one of the ways we maintain security and quality. There has to be documentation and performance and accessibility, usability and testing, and there's a page going into more detail on all of those requirements. And some of the things that I'm talking about are especially hard on the accessibility and usability front. So let me show you a couple of things in the admin UI where things are better than they used to be. New tabs first. And then, so here we go. Maybe I should make that a little bigger. This is basically a fresh install. I booted it up last night of Drupal 7. I don't think I did any customization on the site. And this is what it looks like when you're adding an article to your site. There's a text field for the title. There's some sort of autocomplete field for adding tags. There's the body area where you can paste in HTML or write it from scratch if you're inclined to do that. An image, and then all this metadata at the bottom. Are you going to provide a link for it in the main menu, revision information, blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking at this as a user with all permissions. If you log in as a user with fewer permissions, and we typically have sort of a content admin role that has fewer permissions, then some of these things will be hidden just to simplify the page. So that's what it looks like in Drupal 7. The corresponding page in Drupal 8. Some work has been done. I think it's improved. The layout has changed. The colors, there's a little bit more blue. So the metadata is now in this block over to the right. It's basically the same options available. Title goes there. The body comes right underneath the title instead of having the tags in between. I think that's a good layout decision. Drupal 8 by default ships with a WYSIWYG in core, CK editor. And that's a big usability improvement. And of course, we had contributed modules. Those of us who are in the business of building sites for others would install it. But out of the box now, Drupal 8 comes with an editor. Tags haven't changed much. Image hasn't changed much. And whether or not it's published has been moved to this dedicated little checkbox. That actually looked a little different in earlier iterations of Drupal 8. So there's a little bit of progress. Another thing where some progress has been made, where it's sort of, explicitly involved some design work. This is the status report in Drupal 7 and early versions of Drupal 8. So it's a table, 2 columns, some sort of description of what's being tested, and some sort of information about it. So the configuration file is supposed to be write protected, and it is, so that row is green. A blue row means some sort of enhancement isn't enabled. It's sort of lower than a warning. And isn't it beautiful? No. And that got redesigned in Drupal 8.3. And why can't I get an option click? And this is what it looks like now. We have some icons for errors, warnings, and checked. We've pulled out some of the most important information, what version of Drupal we're running, what version of PHP in the database. And then we group the errors together, and then the warnings, and then all the status messages. So the most important information is closer to the top of the page. You have less scrolling. Is it still a table? I'm not sure whether these are tables or not. Probably they're not tables. Anyway, it's still basically a table, however it's implemented. It's still 2 columns. And it's still largely the same information, but some effort was put into designing this page. So we've made progress.
Also works on mobile.
Yeah, and Drupal 8 in general has a lot of mobile improvements for administration that weren't there in Drupal 7. Oh. Let me get out of, oh no, status report creator. What happened? How do I get back to it? There we go. So those are some examples where progress has been made. One big area which is really actively being developed is the handling of media files. And this has been a real headache for a lot of people for a long time. And Drupal 8 is finally making progress on it in core. Previously in Drupal 7, we've had contrib modules that extend Drupal and do a lot of the same functionality. But one problem with those is that they don't necessarily meet the core gates that I mentioned before. They're not necessarily accessible. They might have performance problems. They might not have the code quality that Drupal requires. And so a lot of effort is going into getting media handling into core. So I think this first link is just to an issue on the media queue. And that's one that, like this week, Adam Honig, who's here, Fina Proxima, has been working on, and Sam Mortensen. And we reviewed it at the weekly UX meeting. Like just last week, a related issue, the media library, was added to Drupal core. And one of the things posted on that issue are some mock-ups. And what should a media library look like? And a lot of effort went in. We had 2 or 3 designers. There was one day where I watched on Slack and they just posted revision after revision after revision saying how it should work. This little blank checkbox in the upper right corner is something, I think I was the first one to suggest it. If we know that when something is selected, we'll put a check mark there. And I made the point that before you've clicked on anything, you have to know that it's clickable, that it's selectable. And so we need some sort of empty checkbox before it's been selected. And then there's a lot of discussion on what happens on the hover state, how much of the title should show, where does that link go. These are all design decisions, and these are things that went back and forth for a long time. And I think have gone through a couple of changes since this mock-up was actually posted to the issue queue and it started getting implemented. Where do these buttons go? We have 2 copies of the button to apply a bulk action. And then there's a filter button to apply these filters. You can choose whether you want to show images or video or everything, how to sort. And there's a select all button. Where does that button go? So
I think it looks great.
thank you. A lot of work went into it. And people, of course, wonder why it can't just be as easy as Facebook. And that gets back to why a CMS is hard. We would love to make it as easy to use as Facebook, but it ain't easy. And here we have on my site that I spun up yesterday, the actual implementation of that mock-up. And sort of in the spirit of Spaceballs, everything happening now is happening now. One of the things in my media library is that mock-up. And there's my avatar for GitHub, and here's my yellow pig hat. And yeah, this actually works. This is a fully functional web page. They're all images. I didn't upload any videos or audio or anything. Can I change the sort order? Yeah.
Is there a tour on this?
Is there a tour on this? I don't believe so. I don't see the tour icon. And then the thing actively being worked on, I didn't just have to download the development version of Drupal 8.6, which is scheduled for release in October. The first alpha is scheduled to come out in a few weeks, I think. But I didn't just download the dev version. I then had to apply a patch from the issue where Sam's actively working on it. So I had to apply that patch. But the interesting thing here is I can add media, and then a simplified version of that media library pops up. And I have the signifier that this is clickable. That link goes to the edit page for for that media item. Let's see, I think I set it to unlimited. Yeah, if I had said that the field only supports 2 elements, then after selecting 2, the third one would have been grayed out. It wouldn't let me select more than are allowed. All sorts of nice implementation details. And Sam is working on this. He's putting in a lot of work into the implementation. Often, what slows down the adoption of a feature like this is that the few of us who are interested in user experience don't have enough time to give reviews and say either, yeah, a great job. That's not what we're looking for on a Drupal issue. Just, yeah, this is great, isn't as helpful as, this is great, but you know it would make it even better. A change in the wording, this is unclear, something should be rearranged. Like, criticism is welcomed on the Drupal issues queue. And if we had a few more designers paying attention to that, looking at the latest implementation and evaluating it, it would speed up the adoption of the media library into core and this media widget. And I think that should attach them. And haha, I have no fear. I do live demos. And this one I didn't actually test. Usually I test my demos, but this one just works. I tested getting up to that point. I didn't test saving the page. So yeah, that is sort of the bleeding edge of where the media library is in Drupal. And I'm pretty optimistic, and Adam has a much more informed opinion than I do, that this will go into Drupal 8.6. You will be able to download it in October and get these features. Some other things where we need work. The log page and the permissions page are 2 places where we think maybe are good places to start. So this is the page for log messages, my PHP errors, and missing files, and notices that cron jobs have run. In Drupal 7, wasn't this inside a collapsible field set? And it seems to be exposed. Didn't really think of that. Oh, one thing that almost no one knows is that if you hover over one of these messages, the full message pops up, so you don't have to click through. You just need your reading glasses. And you can just show the actual error messages and worse. You can look for just user messages or just page not found errors or whatever. So you can filter. But basically, this page looks the same as it did in Drupal 7. Yeah.
What is the triangle in the type box and severity box? What does the triangle signify?
I think that's a scroll button.
It's Chrome's multi-select indicator.
Ah, thank you.
Oh,
For the sake of the recording, someone asked what this little triangle was, and Aaron mentioned from the audience that that's how Chrome indicates a multi-select. So
Does it scroll, or is that?
it does not seem to scroll.
Or we could debug it. It could be a console.
oh, it does scroll.
Oh yeah, it can scroll, but clicking on the triangle does not scroll. But yeah, there are more things in here than fit, and I can scroll them.
As long as I know what it means, I can go forward.
So, and then sort of standard Drupal pattern, if there are more messages than fit on one screen. I think if I clear the filters that I chose, we get a pager at the bottom. But sort of the filtering and paging experience would be a lot better if we had some fancy JavaScript framework widget to do it for us. And this is a simple enough page that this is one of the things that people are thinking of as a proof of concept for that next step in the development of the Drupal admin UI. Another page which hasn't changed much since Drupal 7 is the permissions page. And we have, in this case, base Drupal installation, no additional modules put in. We have 4 columns. So the first is what the permission is. It indicates which module provides that permission and the name of the permission. And then there's a column for each user role on the site. And we have, a few dozen permissions? Like maybe that's 100? I don't know. I didn't count. And one problem with this is I've looked at sites that have a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen different user roles. And this is just a base Drupal installation with the standard modules enabled. You could start adding core modules, and a lot of sites add 100 modules. And so that could double, triple, anything, the number of permissions. And then you have a checkbox for each role and for each permission. So if you have 100-odd permissions and a few dozen roles, the total number of checkboxes can be more than PHP can process in one submission. And so then you have to go into your server and tweak your PHP settings. It's a real headache. Again, this is something that could benefit from a nice JavaScript framework and a nice widget that gives you better filtering, gives you, and when you click the submit button, it only submits the things that have to be changed rather than every variable on the page. So, yeah, if you're an expert in React or Vue and you want to do something like that, that would be great. If you're a designer and you want to sketch out what that page should look like, that would be an advance. That would be helpful. And there's an active initiative going on to bring some JavaScript framework into Drupal core. And I know that a lot of people have built sort of headless or decoupled Drupal, where Drupal is used as a backend with its REST API, and then the REST API gets consumed by some JavaScript application. We certainly want to make it easier for people to do that on the front end, and we want to bring it into the back end and start off with a proof of concept on one of those 2 pages I was looking at. And once we work out the bugs and see that it actually works, make it available throughout the back end. There's an initiative page for this. I added a link in the presentation to a core issue where it's being discussed. Dries' blog post, and I think the blog post mentions a progress report from just a month or so ago. And of course, we're lucky to be at Design for Drupal today. Dries is giving us the keynote speech in about an hour and a half. I think he's going to be talking about this sort of thing on the front end. But I think that whatever he says on the front end is likely to have some application to what's on the back end. This, by the way, shows some of the design work that's being done on Drupal.org itself. This is the initiative page for the JavaScript modernization initiative and the admin UI. What are we working on? We have 4 people involved. Oh, this is a huge job. We need more than 4 people involved. I think Sally Young is the initiative lead. She's the one who wrote the blog post. Not sure what sort of role Matt Grill plays. Christina is a designer. I think she's the one who was behind the redesign of the status report page. And Angie, or web chick, is just sort of like number 2 in command of the Drupal hordes. And Christina and Angie normally participate in the weekly UX meetings. There's also work going on to modernize the 7 theme. That is the theme you see by default on the Drupal backend. There's a proposed style guide. And just in the last few weeks, I think, a little bit of work has been started, just sort of a framework put in place for a GitHub repository where people can start collaborating on what it should look like. So the proposed style guide has some discussion. It has a color palette, some font stuff, some descriptions of form elements, some little icon work. I'm not sure how current this is. I haven't seen, if you scroll to the bottom and look at the latest comment, it's kind of old. But some effort has been put into this. Quite a bit of discussion. Here's the GitHub repository for redesigning the 7 theme. I think only 3 people have contributed so far. Basically, they started with a clone of the 7 theme. Maybe they put in some tooling. There's a yarn lock file there, for example, and some instructions on how to build. And then there are a bunch of issues, most of which are marked needs design and needs definition. So we're sort of at the very early stages of working on this. If you have opinions about color scheme, form elements, web components, visual design, spacing. By the way, if you missed it yesterday, there was a presentation from 3 people at Last Call Media. They were talking about the redesign work they did for the admin UI on the mass.gov website. They did some really nice work there. And I very rarely see much attention paid to the design of the admin UI on any client site that I've built or I've seen other people build. That was the first time I've ever seen a lot of effort put into it. They had some nice ideas. They got into fine details like vertical spacing and using the same color scheme on the back end of the site as on the front end of the site. The colors mean different things in the 2 places, but there's some consistency there. So if you want to have a look at this repository, choose one of the issues, offer some opinions, show some interest. That'll help. How many people have heard of the out-of-the-box initiative for Drupal 8? Only a few. I keep trying to open in new tabs and it doesn't always work. So with Drupal 8.6, we have an experimental demo profile that includes some lovely pictures. And what about copyrights? This food was cooked, and these photos were taken explicitly for Drupal. So these are all open source photography. And there's a little bit of color in the theme. You can click through to a recipe page. And I hope it's responsive. So just if you contrast that with one of the other tabs I have open, I actually saved one of these guys, didn't I? Oh, here's my test page. Good old Drupal blue. This is still the default Bartik theme. This is what the front end looks like by default. It's not a great selling point for Drupal. And the Umami theme is an attempt to show that you wouldn't pay $10,000 or $20,000 for a front end that looks like that, but it's better than a poke in the eye, right? So this is just something to give you an idea of what Drupal looks like when it's not a perfectly blank site. And then, if you look at issues that are tagged as Umami stable blocker, so this theme and this installation profile are still marked as experimental, I think, or maybe alpha or beta or something. We'd like to get them sort of all the bugs worked out and declare them stable. There's not that many issues there, and a bunch of these are actually already fixed. If we just look at the open issues, I'm not sure why I have a link that doesn't filter on those. I think there are 4. One that's postponed, I don't know why. 2 that need review. And again, a lot of things get stuck on review. We want people to say, yes, this passes usability, yes, this is accessible, or no, you should make this change to make it more accessible. There's one issue that needs work. This looks like a manageable list of tasks to get Umami stable for Drupal 8.6. And then just a few things that I've thought about a little bit. As I said at the start, I don't have a lot of interest in visual design. I certainly don't have any expertise in it. But there's more to design than visual design. And I care about things like information architecture and usability. And I always wonder, we have these hierarchical menus. Can we do better than that? We have structure. Oh, another thing lots of people don't know. On mobile, the admin menu by default comes out on the left, but you have the option of putting it on the left. And then you can expand menus without having a page reload. And I remember Jessie Beach did the lion's share of the work on the admin menu a few years ago when she was still working in Drupal. And I helped out a little bit. So I have there's a fond place in my heart for the admin menu. But basically, we have hierarchical menus. There must be better ways to navigate the back end of a site than hierarchical menus. We don't even have a search thing in the admin toolbar. We ought to have that, right? Like in Google Docs, you have that. You start typing in the help menu, and it says, oh, did you want this menu item? Why don't we have that in Drupal? We should have that.
They have it in Backdrop.
They do?
I think so.
Kelly tells me that they have exactly that in Backdrop. Well,
A few years ago, maybe.
we ought to steal that. Excuse me, adapt it. I'm sure Backdrop would be flattered if we made use of some of their code. And then there's some things about the information architecture, like the block library. I don't think I have any blocks on these sample sites I've been working on. I guess the Umami site, there will be something there. So let's see. Why can't I see the admin toolbar? There we go. So I think it's under the wrong top level of this hierarchical menu layout. You have to go to block layout, and then you click on the custom block library to get the list of blocks available on the site. I think that blocks should be under content. And I can implement that. I can put them under content, but Drupal will not accept my patch because that would be an incompatible change. And my saying that it's a good idea, and everyone in this room saying, yeah, I agree, isn't good enough. We need some user testing. So I'm working on a module that does that and makes some other changes because I don't want to do just that one thing. And I'd like to be able to do some user testing. I've never organized user testing. That's not really my area of expertise. But yeah, I think that if I get 4, 5, 6 different ideas into this module so that we can run a user testing session, we might be able to make some changes to the information architecture.
Benji,
Yeah.
will you explain why you think this is a good idea?
Because blocks are sort of editable pieces of text or images that are more like content than they are like configuration. And on a lot of sites, we give content editors the permission to edit the blocks. And we don't give them permission even to access the parent page because they don't have permission to change the layout of the blocks. So it's a pretty common use case, I think, where you want to give someone permission to edit blocks, and then if they have permission to edit them, you want to be able to give them permission to list them and see what's available. And then it's hard because they can't navigate there.
Also, when they do get there, the user interface has all the other things that they shouldn't be working on, block layout and configuration of the block fields.
Yeah, if you
Split apart.
if you give them permission to access the parent page so that they can get to the list of blocks, then they have things that they're clutter. Things that we want to protect them from.
And so then I have a follow-up. So are you thinking that it's a tab on the content page?
Am I thinking of it as a tab on the content page? Yes. Oh, look. on this site locally, I did it. So here's the main content page, admin/content. And there's a tab for comments, there's a tab for files, there's a tab for media. And with this custom module I'm working on, there's a tab for blocks, which is going to be empty. Oh no, it's not empty. It has one. So yeah, I'm working on that module, and yeah, so far it basically works.
That's good.
Thank you. Ooh, boy, I got lucky with timing. Another harder thing to work on is the process of adding fields to a content type and then configuring them. And maybe I'll open that in another tab. And this is central to how Drupal works. It's central to one of the strengths of Drupal with its structured and related content. Let me get the menu out of the way. So I'm editing the structure basic page content type, and maybe I want to add an image field or, I don't know, another taxonomy field or something. I have this lovely drop-down list. And it's grouped into general and number and reference and text. One thing that we discussed a few months ago on the UX weekly discussion is adding some help text. When you select something, help text for that thing appears. And in particular, it says, if you read these 2 lines of text, it basically says, oh, no, you don't want this. You don't want a file or image. You want to add a media. Yeah. Item, because now we have media in Drupal core. But basically, this is horrible. And you know, text formatted long. Okay, that's maybe self-explanatory, but the fact that it's just a list and the fact that it's so hard to know what you want is a hard problem to solve. And in fact, this is sort of the problem that got me started attending the weekly UX calls. And yeah, here's a screenshot of the way it currently works. I think I'm looking at the core issue now, yeah. And there are some screenshots further down. This is how it could look. I wish I could make it a little bigger. There we go. Where instead of just saying option list, give a little screenshot of what the widget looks like. I hit. Oh, there, it's nice and big. And this is one proposal for a different way to help site builders decide which field they want to add to a content type, whether you want a text area or a single line of text. I think that's visually really clear. Image field, link field, maybe there's room for improvement there on what visual information we're going to improve. It's a design problem. And I really should allow some time for questions. So this is my last slide. If you're frustrated by how terrible Drupal is and you want to make it better, get involved. Come to the sprint tomorrow. If you missed the introductory remarks, notice the sprint is in a different building. It's right behind this one. Join Drupal on Slack, and then join the UX channel and the admin UI channel. The admin UI channel has started just recently. It only has a few people. The admin UI channel is where the weekly UX call is announced, and it's Tuesday afternoons in Eastern Time. And it usually goes for about an hour. Typically, we have about 6 people on the call, get to know some people who do a lot of work for Drupal, help out. So like Drupal Slack.herokuapp.com is where to sign up for the Drupal Slack. And then, as I said, the UX and admin UI channels are where a lot of these things are being discussed actively. Or come to the sprint tomorrow, I'll be there. So, it's 10:50 already. I took a few questions in process. Any closing questions before I cede the room to the next?
What building is the thing tomorrow?
What building is the thing tomorrow, the sprint tomorrow? It's in building 56, which if you look at an MIT map, MIT likes doing things by the numbers.
It's not the cyclotron.
Right, I hope it's not the cyclotron building. That's across the street, right? I'm not really.
If you go out where the gym is, which is right kind of where the main auditorium is, and cross the bridge, that's building 56.
Okay. I suppose this isn't very interesting, but for the sake of people listening, we just got directions to building 56.
We'll figure it out.
Other questions? How many of you will I see tomorrow at the sprint? Show of hands. Eric, thank you. Mark? Any designers? Maybe. You'll be at the sprint, great. Well, thanks for listening.